Hi everyone, welcome to the VFX Notes Podcast. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and usually I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi Hugo? That's too good.
This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtics. For scriptwriting, beatboards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got F-Track Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with CineSync and F-Track Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconic, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show. Hello, everyone. Oh, I thought it was going to be a bit bigger. Sorry about that. So I have a friend today on the show. He's going to talk all about Godzilla, I guess.
Yeah, put him on instead. That's what the audience wants to see. Give the audience what they want, Hugo.
I know, right? Like the Oscars is the same thing. They only want to see the dog from. They only want to see Messi and nothing else from Anatomy of the Fall instead of the Oscars itself. Yeah, I'll leave the guy. Now this is for kids, so this is really hard to take off without hurting my hand. Jesus. Oh my God, it's so tight. Okay, yeah, so yeah, that's it.
I love it.
Hi Ian, how are you doing?
I'm good. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about the VFX Oscar nominated film Godzilla Minus One. But before we do, Hugo, we always want to make sure to give a special shout out to our sponsors, our Patreon supporters, and everyone who likes and subscribe and watches us on YouTube. We wouldn't be able to do the show without them, of course, Hugo.
No, we wouldn't. Thank you so much. Of course, the sponsors, of course, they really contribute a lot to this entire adventure that we've been doing online. But yeah, the patrons as well, and all the followers and all the amazing comments we get on YouTube as well. Yeah, we love doing the show, and everyone seems very happy with the show, and people really love to watch it. And never forget, I keep saying this every week. The biggest question I get from the show is, how do I listen to the show as an audio podcast? And don't forget, you can still listen to it as an audio podcast if you use the YouTube Music app. It's free to download, and you can lock your phone, and you can still, work out or run a marathon while listening to all 55 episodes of the VFX Notes Podcast.
Wow.
Yep.
Brilliant. Yes, make sure to check us out on that podcast, and obviously you can watch the video on YouTube. Hugo, Godzilla Minus One. This is the film directed, written, and visual effects supervised by Takashi Yamazaki.
Yep.
Hopefully I pronounced that properly. It came as a big surprise to me, this film. Yep. I do kind of get into the North American Godzillas. I watched Shin Godzilla, but I didn't even know this film, Godzilla Minus One, was being made. And it just has almost taken the film world by storm.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that, of course. But what did you think about the film?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, right? Because I remember months ago, I saw the poster on the cinema, and I didn't even, I'll be honest, this is no disrespect, but I just didn't even care, because there's so many Godzilla movies.
Right.
I kind of saw it on the poster and said, another Godzilla movie. We just have every Godzilla movie. There's there's 40 films of Godzilla. This is number 40, actually. It's the anniversary of the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. It's incredible that it's been 70 years. And I've only really watched a few Godzillas. I have the original. I really recommend the Criteria edition of the original version from the 50s. It's a really good movie. And then I watched a couple of Japanese Godzillas on the 80s when I was younger. Really loved them. And then, of course, Gareth Edwards' Godzilla and of course, the 90s Godzilla. I think I've only seen 5 Godzillas out of the 40. So I didn't really care much, no, and I didn't even went to the cinema to see it. That's the shocking thing. I didn't even go to the cinema to see it because I just kind of like I glossed over. We were so busy with Mission Impossible and Barbie and Oppenheimer and Poor Things. Everything was coming out. And so unfortunately didn't see it on the cinema. I did put up my projector and I saw it in 4K on my projector, so at least I had a good experience. I watched it twice. And so I was super surprised as well, Ian. This film is really taking the Oscars by storm, completely. And which is
hilarious because it's only nominated for visual effects, but it still appears to be taking the Oscars by storm.
Yeah, it is. It's everywhere. You have like Godzilla little figurines everywhere. Even Steven Spielberg took a picture with it, and they were on the luncheon. They were a huge success on the luncheon as well. Not as a big success as Messi the dog, of course, because he's a bigger success than everything
Messi wins
else.
best visual effects.
But I have to say that's an incredible performance on the film, by the way, by Messi. Like, it is incredible, which I need to find out if there is visual effects involved, because I think there must be visual effects involved on that dog sequence. But that's another conversation another day. But yeah, I guess, this is the celebration of the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. It's the 40th film, very small budget, only 10 million of budget, which is incredible for the film that we watch. And I was surprised by the film, and I was entertained, and I liked it, but I liked it, but I didn't like it. There was a couple of problems for me on the film. I feel like the film was good. I really loved the Godzilla sections. I thought they were outstanding. Every time Godzilla was on the film, my God, that's amazing. The rest of the story was interesting. I really liked the kamikaze angle. I thought it's very refreshing to see the story of the Japanese, of the World War II from Japan from that perspective. We never really see that perspective, which was really nice to see that fight, the inner fight he had as a kamikaze that didn't do what he was supposed to do according to the country and the army. I thought the scale was outstanding. Godzilla was so huge and the visual effects were outstanding. But I felt like the film was a bit slow. I felt the film, the editing of the film, and there was a few sections that I was a bit bored, and I thought there was a bit too much exposition. I felt that we spent way too much time talking about the attack and talking about what's going to happen instead of just showing it. I just felt, and also for me personally, the historical section of the film of the Second World War and the nuclear explosions and also the United States intervening, I felt that was a bit underdeveloped as well. So I think the film has some problems. I feel the film is not very tight. I think the editing is a bit too long. The film is too long, 2 hours and a half. And it could have been a bit better. And I just feel I was a bit underwhelmed. I felt the film was good, but I felt there was a few problems. But what do you think?
Well, I completely disagree with you, and I really love the film. And of course, the reason for that in some ways is that it's an antidote to classic superhero, big, huge budget adventure films that we're used to seeing, that I also love mostly, but I just feel have probably got a little bit run of the mill. This took the best bits of those, in terms of the action, and made it more horrific.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll agree with you is that you could probably watch this film on DVD or home entertainment, and you could enjoy it just by watching the Godzilla bits.
Yeah.
And you would probably just, that is also the problem in some other big budget films. People literally skip to the main huge sequences. But as a film that talked about the aftermath and the concurrency of war, and in some ways it's almost not about Godzilla, it's about post-war Japan, I was thoroughly engrossed and just thought it was brilliant. But guess what, Hugo? I didn't see it at the movies either. So that's amazing that I think I took that away from watching it on the VES, effectively screener, on my TV.
Yeah.
And, that's pretty powerful because I want to see this movie at the
Yeah,
cinemas.
too late now.
I want to see the black and white version of it too, right? That is out. But it was a very powerful movie from my point of view. And part of it is going, okay, this wasn't made by typical Hollywood. It was made in the Japanese way.
But Ian, I agree with that. Like, of course, I agree that it's a good antidote of the really crappy movies we've been getting lately in Hollywood and the action flicks, and it's really a much better film than that. Of course, I'm not. I don't think a film can live by being compared, and also it has to live by itself. I just felt that the film itself, as a movie, had some problems in terms of editing and some problems of pace. And I felt like the second... Let me say it this way. I wish the film was just a Second World War movie or a Godzilla movie. I felt that the connection and the merging of both was a bit shoehorned. I felt that it didn't really completely work, either by us not being enough time on Godzilla or not being enough time on the other story. And I felt that sometimes the editing was a bit rushed. But keep in mind that I had this conversation with Anna. We watched both of us together, and I felt she said it really she had a really good point, which was, this is a Japanese movie. Different rhythm, different type of movie.
Yeah.
It's not a Western movie, and I understand that, because I've seen a lot of Japanese cinema, and Japanese cinema is, for me personally, as a Portuguese man, an acquired taste. It is different. It's slower. It's a different type of editing. They connect images in a different way. So maybe that's what I'm reacting to, because I'm so used to Godzilla, the American version, I guess. And I think maybe that's why. Maybe if I watch more Japanese Godzillas, I'll see that this is the kind of Godzilla that they usually do. That's probably could be it.
Yeah. And, it's a visual effects film, pure and simple.
Yeah.
That's why it's nominated for the Visual Effects Oscar. But it's a character film. And that's... I know what you mean about it needs to stand alone, but you can't not compare this to some of the other Godzilla films.
Of course.
I'm first in line with any Godzilla film, but in the last couple of big ones, the characters are a little bit second fiddle to the monsters. Yeah. One of the ones I really liked was Kong Skull Island. I felt like the characters were back, front and center, and of course that doesn't have Godzilla in it, a tiny bit. And I don't know if you've been watching Monarch, Legacy of the Monsters.
I haven't seen it yet.
I don't know if that's the right name.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
It's very much a character piece, and there's the monsters are great in it, actually. But with Godzilla Minus One, you really are focused on this fighter pilot, and then you're kind of focused on his slightly strange family life that he ends up having, because he basically just adopts this woman and her child, sort of just looks after them, and then there's another woman comes into the picture closer to the end, right? It is kind of like an unusual story, and that's what I always like about some Japanese and South Korean type films.
Yeah, no, I love Japanese movies. I have a lot of love for that kind of movies. I don't know what happened, and I've watched it twice. I thought, I need to watch it again. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I don't know, because everyone loves this film, and why am I not really in that invested? And I must admit, man, I struggled a little bit, and in the middle of the film, I kind of was a bit sleepy, and I was just not doing well with this film, and I don't know why. But apart from that, I must say that the film as an event, and the film as the Godzilla sections and the visual effects, the film is absolutely outstanding, and the sections of visual effects are just absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm so happy that they got nominated, especially because it's such a small movie and the budget is so small, and also it's great to see a director being nominated for visual effects. This hasn't happened since the 60s, since Kubrick was nominated Kubrick was nominated for Best Visual Effects in 2001, and actually that was the only Oscar he won, by being the visual effects supervisor, co-visual effects supervisor. He was together. It wasn't just him, of course, and Douglas Carbone was there as well. But I felt like it's amazing that they're getting this kind of recognition, because the visual effects are just outstanding, and I'm so happy to see the viral factor, of them celebrating when they were nominated with all the little Godzillas and they were like partying and with the confetti. It's just been awesome to see. It's an amazing story. Just that, that there's only 35 people involved and such a struggle to do this film, and I felt like it's just, the story writes itself, doesn't it? Like it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's like a film in itself,
But that, yes, absolutely. That comes, though, doesn't it, from audiences' visceral reaction to the Godzilla scenes and the destruction scenes and the emotion of the destruction and the emotion of Godzilla too, like as a character. Like, I actually think the reason for the nomination, but also the audience reaction to it is like in different waves. A, they just think it's a good film.
Yeah.
B, the visual effects are really effective. Then they learn that it was like only 30-something people doing it and a tiny budget. And, that then they learn Japanese visual effects conditions are not really necessarily that great compared to, say, other studios.
Yeah. Although
we know, as we've been covering in the industry for the past couple of shows now, that things have been crazy everywhere.
Yeah.
I just think that the audience and the readers, people reading about this film, they learn these things.
Yeah.
And this sort of apparent perception of the visual effects of Godzilla Minus One just grows and grows.
Yeah.
And, people love a bit of an outsider as well, Hugo, don't they?
They love it. And I feel like they have a big chance of winning really here, if you think about it, because it's really competitive this year. It is. I think it's difficult to really predict. I understand that we haven't talked about this fact on the other episodes we did, because some of the episodes were done before the nominations came out. But now this one, we know the nominations. And I feel, like it looks like the creator can win. It looks like Napoleon can win. But then we have Godzilla as well as an outsider. Then, of course, you have Guardians of the Galaxy that looks absolutely outstanding. It's just... I think Mission Impossible is probably the loser in that team, those 5 nominations. I think it's probably the one that has the less chance of winning, in my opinion, of course, just my opinion. But it's a tough year, and everyone loves an underdog. Everyone loves these kind of stories of a smaller budget. That's what happened last year with Everything All at Once, and that's also what happened with Ex Machina. That's what happened with The Matrix as well. These kind of stories of the smaller production usually resonate quite a lot with the voters. And I feel like it could, we could have one of those things on our hands again this year. And and which would be fascinating. I would be thrilled for them, of course. But it's a very competitive year. It's very difficult.
Just to be clear, you obviously mean with Everything All at Once the fact that it was a bit of an underdog for the actual best picture. Not visual effects.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, for that's what I meant. Sorry. I should have rephrased. But there's always, even on best picture, even on the other films, there's always like this underdog story always plays really well.
Agree.
And I think that's what happens here. Now, I do have one. The only reason I feel, in my opinion, that maybe it won't get the Oscar is maybe I'll be challenged by that, and maybe by the time you see this podcast, there'll be a lot of breakdowns out, and you'll see the breakdowns on the video even itself, because, of course, as the time of recording right now, we haven't seen much, except there's like a behind-the-scenes film in Japanese, which you can still put the subtitles in YouTube, and it does a relatively good job. And there's these articles, these really nice Japanese articles with all the behind-the-scenes and stills, which you've shared on your website on Before and Afters. But I feel like I have a theory why we don't have a lot of breakdowns. Well, there's 2 things in my view. One of them, of course, I think they were completely surprised by the fact that they were nominated. I don't believe they were thinking they were going to be nominated. I never, for a million years, thought that they would really think they would. That's just because it's such a competitive year, especially after the Bake Off. The Bake Off was so strong. And secondly, this film was done a while ago. I'm assuming this team has probably left this production a long time ago, moved on to other productions. It's not that easy to open the Maya scenes, the Houdini scenes, the nuke scenes again and do breakdowns after the whole team is scattered or moved to another project. It might be difficult for them to reopen all those files and to to basically bring back the entire pipeline, because the film was done a while ago and they're not waiting, and they didn't do the breakdowns usually are done right away, and maybe I feel that they didn't do the breakdowns right away. Okay, so Ian, we have some breaking news here, okay? Just wanted...
Whoa.
So this is, Hugo and Ian from the future, and apparently while we were recording the episode, the new breakdown came out for Godzilla, so doesn't matter anymore what I said. Because
we could have checked social media.
The funny thing about this is that the breakdown came out just in the last few minutes that we were still recording.
I know.
It is so funny. But hey, Ian, I just really wanted to do a patch here on our recording because, oh my God, what the hell? This breakdown is just, I have no words. It's just insane.
I mean, apart from showing the incredible visual effects work, and we'll talk a bit about what the breakdown shows, it's as quirky as the movie itself, including a small moment when a Godzilla maquette does a little... basically does this, which I think has got to be the funniest bit of the breakdown. And I just love it. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
My God, Ian, they are... Forget about everything I said about not doing it or they were a bit delayed. They were really working on this, and I think this is the perfect timing. You're right, it's so quirky and so funny, but also, man... They're really going all in, aren't they? Because they keep talking about the budget, and they didn't have almost anyone, and they only had 45 people, and then they showed the rooms. They actually showed
the angle.
It is an amazing story. My God, now I think you're right. I think they might win. This story of the director going with the chair around the artists and talking to them, even having footage of the floor where they're working, this is just not seen anymore. We never see this ever. And it's just so cool.
And just on that point, I don't remember, to be frank, if we've talked about this when we talked about the creator, but there was something about the story behind the making of the creator, which is true. It was definitely done on a budget that was less than the usual huge Hollywood thing. And Gareth was, the person driving that because he'd had experience on these other huge films, and he knew what was needed to be done to be different and to get greenlit, basically. But there's an interesting, curious outcome of that, because the creator was probably pushing towards, hey, we did this on a lower budget, even though we've got ILM. And I have to be honest, it's hard for them to still push that line.
It's impossible.
When Godzilla does its line, you know. Now, both can be true, and they are, because they're different countries and different production setups.
And it's funny because they are very similar directors, because Gareth is also a visual effects background as well. And so I'm assuming Gareth also has the same kind of approach. And it's really funny because now if you think about it, that's why I really wanted to do this patch of our conversation. And I wanted to put in this to talk about, because this is really my kind of alley, this is how I work. I really love when directors or supervisors and supervisors of directors, and a bit like I do as well in my career in a much, much smaller scale, of course. But I love this ethos because it just makes so much sense for someone that is directing also to know visual effects. And it just helps the communication, and it helps the way the film is actually achieved and also filmed and even put together. And it's so interesting that we have 2 films like that on the 5 nominees. And I love it. I absolutely love this. And I feel like this is, for me, in my view, the way all films should have this kind of approach if a film has a lot of visual effects. But I better go for it.
Do you think it helps also in that they kind of know what they can get away with.
Yeah, of course.
So by shooting, and you'll see in this breakdown, there's a lot of, green screen elements. And of course, big films have used this since we can do visual effects. But it's almost like they knew exactly how much set to build or not to build. And part of that is budgetary reasons as well. They knew, well, we can't have an amazing gimbal for the plane or a ship that's swaying. So we'll just do it the cheap way. And frankly, it's super effective.
Yep.
In fact, sometimes filmmakers often talk about this. Sometimes the restrictions are the things that make the film better, feel more raw.
Exactly.
It's when you've got all the money in the world that sometimes it ends up not looking real.
I think it has to do with that, and it has to do with knowledge as well, like you said, because I've been, in my career, I've supervised a lot of productions where I was not directing, and I'm talking about much smaller scale, like commercials and short films and TV shows, but I feel like it's the same kind of like methodology. When I'm working with a director that has no clue about visual effects, it is really difficult because we don't even talk the same language, and the same with the DOP. Like, you're explaining things, they don't really understand what we're talking about. Then they make, I'm not saying wrong decisions, but they make decisions that are not informed. That's the problem. And so sometimes they make the sets too big and we're not even using half of it. Or sometimes they don't put what they should put there because they're focusing on something else that is not even important. And whenever I've been on set, either on productions that I've directed or in productions that I've been together with a director that is also a VFX artist, it is just such a different approach, because when we're building the shots, just like on this breakdown, we build them like tailor-made for that VFX. And it just makes it so much more efficient, so much cheaper. And like you said, limitations, man, for me, I keep harping around about The Matrix, which we've done on this show already, and so you can always go in and check that. But The Matrix is the perfect example of this. Highly limited budget, and look at what they did with that. Like, I feel like budget restrictions helps drive creativity a lot, and I feel this is a prime example. This film, now that I've seen this breakdown, I think, without a doubt, that this is probably the best showreel I've seen in years for a film.
Yes.
For years.
Why is that? It is the most accessible VFX breakdown we have seen, in that, of course, we're so used to beautiful VFX breakdowns that show wipes and the CG wireframes and, befores and afters and the green screen photography. Like, those are beautiful. Partly because it's narrated, of course, and it has the subtitles because he's speaking in Japanese. There is something about this breakdown which makes it very accessible to anyone who doesn't know about visual effects. But people who do know about visual effects, they're also like marveling at, oh, I love how you solve that with extra mocap for the crowds. I love how you solve that for the ship, for the plane that, you're just rocking around a little bit. That is bold,
it
right?
Is.
Because you don't want to simplify it, and you don't want to show that your VFX were easily done, but they've made it very accessible to VFX and non-VFX people.
Because absolutely. And we do talk about this a lot on the show, where sometimes showreels become really incomprehensible for most people that are from the outside of the industry. This just has that perfect balance. It is very informative. It's almost like a keynote presentation. He's like explaining things in a simple way. It's only 6 minutes long. It's just enough time. And he's so good at explaining. He's really good at explaining, like the sentences and everything is so well constructed. It's very tight. Even the showreel is efficient, like the film. And I feel like, man, I kid you not, I have not seen anything like this in years. I don't think we've been blessed with such a interesting approach of doing a showreel that will definitely, man, I think this is the perfect response to try to get an Oscar, because they will get the votes from, of course, the professionals, but they might grab also people that might either be a voter but not in the industry anymore, maybe a bit more older or retired, or they can also pick up the votes from people that are not completely technical knowledge, but also know a bit of it. I think this is a genius stroke, but it doesn't feel like it was misleading in any way. I feel like it's so genuine and so honest. That's why it sounds so cool and so good,
I agree.
Yeah.
There is a line to be run, there's a line with these visual effects breakdowns, and we've talked about this in the main chat as well, Hugo, which is sometimes you want to show the groundbreaking, amazing new tech or the artistry involved, and which there is, by the way, in this film. It's not what I'm saying. But there's another approach, which is, oh my God, we wanted it to look like this. We only had this budget and these number of people, and we're kind of fresh-faced, and here's what we did in this ragtag group. That's what they're going for. And they really achieved it with this genuine VFX breakdown. But you could see how another angle could have been, look at this amazing Houdini sim stuff that we did. But then it just becomes another typical breakdown that we've seen before.
That it's impossible to comprehend or even be digested by anyone. That's the thing.
Yeah. Interestingly, there is a visual effects breakdown as part of the VES Awards for Godzilla Minus One. And it's just one where they have a voiceover, and it's, pretty generic, and it's a bit too, to be honest, rah, 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 saying how easy it was. And it doesn't really work and it's not the central breakdown, it's only for one of the awards. So whoever's decided, and I suspect it's heavily the director,
I think so too,
to approach it this way is very, very clever, is how I would put it.
And also it's a story. You can clearly see it's him, because this is like a story. It's like they're making a story. They're making a film now, because they even put in the reaction of them being nominated. It is so quirky.
Yeah, that's
to
unusual
actually put that in, even to record the reaction, because we never get to see those things. We don't even see. I bet that big companies are so used to getting nominated, they don't even get together waiting for the nomination. This means so much for this team. But, yes, I can't praise it enough. I just made a tweet about it. I did it in caps lock. I never do it in tweets in caps lock. I think this is the best breakdown I've seen in years. And I hats for that. But also, from now that we know more about how the VFX were done, just wanted to briefly talk about that as well. Because I feel like it is really interesting how they actually use the sets to help them so much, and how they've built just one set. It's so funny to see the ship. They just have one set and they reuse it on all shots, and they just use the power of extensions and CG and just normally like dressing up the shot a bit more to make it look like it's different shots. And this is just so clever, and these kind of things are usually an embarrassment for certain big productions. They don't usually say these things. It's funny that on other productions, this would have been something that they would not want to say, that they only had one set, or they say, we couldn't do an hydraulic, we didn't have money, so we just like pretended to be an hydraulic, and they're just going all in. Okay, this is how we did it, and that's it. We are not ashamed of this,
That's an important point to make, because I'm convinced, and I know, that on big, huge productions, this approach is really similar, like completely similar.
We never talk about it.
and part of it is still budget, and part of it is whatever else. The thing is, there's often much more complicated, convoluted visual effects sequences and shots to show for those other films. But I agree with you. They've talked about it in a way that makes you feel very warm and cuddly.
It does.
And completely works.
And this showreel is like tailor-made for you, isn't it? Because it has a stuffy at the end, it has a stuffy in the beginning, it has a stuffy at the end, and it even has your favorite shot as a breakdown as well, with him being regenerated.
Oh, yes, the regeneration.
And which is also cool because we get to see some of the, which is very rare as well, we see screen recording of the softwares themselves, of the actual Maya, Houdini, and we don't see Nuke this time, but we definitely see Nuke's Houdini's interface all the time, which is really interesting. I think it's amazing. It's really cool.
I'm going to make a major prediction that this will influence many VFX breakdowns to come.
Absolutely.
And it'll be bold of Warner Brothers or Universal to allow something like this for one of their big films. But when the VFX studio gets an opportunity to do this, do you know where we sometimes see a bit more fun and games and the story of the making of a piece of content? With commercials.
Yeah. We used to do them at the mill all the time. We used to do that all the time.
Sometimes when the agency is not involved.
Most of them were from Mill Plus, yes.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
The agency, because they tend to do a little bit more serious pieces to camera, on-set stuff. But when the VFX studio has a bit of time, a bit of fun, we do see more of a story point. I'm grasping onto what you just said before, Hugo. They have made a 6-minute film, not a 6-minute visual effects breakdown.
It's a film. It's a story. It's a story. It has a beginning and end. It has introduction. Godzilla's in it as well. Even Godzilla speaks. He's the voiceover narrator, I guess. It is just so good, and it's so smart. And no, I know what you mean. And just imagine this. We're gonna do Barbie soon, but we're gonna talk about that, I'm sure. Imagine if the Warner Bros. Would have had the foresight to actually do something like this for Barbie, because Barbie, for example, would have been a perfect candidate to do a really funny, quirky visual effects breakdown showing the sets and then how they replaced them, and they could even made fun of it, just like on the film they make fun of Barbie. They could have just showed the set and then say, yeah, well, that didn't work, just trash that and then put CG. So they could have made so much fun with that, and it could have probably got nominated if they did that. I just feel that this, I am so happy that you said that. I hope that this really influences. Of course, we're going to have some disingenuous versions of that as well from studios, but I feel that some productions might also strike gold if they do a more honest and more interesting film like these guys did. I just feel it's awesome to see this.
Yeah. The other part of this is it really comes from the visual effects heart. That is the challenge of a studio making something like this, is that they don't want to necessarily be so... I mean, there's visual effects breakdowns that obviously show footage, but a breakdown that includes the crew, the visual effects crew, is unusual. Except in a featurette or a DVD making of. And sometimes those are fun. Yeah,
of course.
Right?
Of course.
Sometimes those are because the artists are a bit more quirky than an actor saying something they need to say about a film. But I think in this case, it really comes from the visual effects heart. And that's why we're responding to it like that too.
Imagine having a crew filming a bit at Framestore, at DNEG, or at ILM. It would be awesome. And I'm sure there's some really quirky people there and really cool, interesting conversations to be had, So,
I agree with you. The more I think about it, we are only talking about a 3-minute to 6-minute breakdown, and there. In a featurette or an hour-long doco, you can have that more fun thing. I'm remembering one that was made for Frozen 2 at Walt Disney Animation Studios. That film, was a little bit troubled, a little bit last minute, and there happens to have been a crew following, the animators and another crew at WDAS. They're very frank, but I wonder, who reviewed that featurette, because sometimes there's a lot of truth bombs and honest bombs in there. That's the challenge of showing crew and revealing too much behind the curtain for these studios.
I understand that. I understand that, and I understand that it might be difficult. But I just wish, maybe this is we talk a lot about this on the podcast. I wish that the documentaries, for example, on the Blu-rays would have more of this. Even now, of course, I'm talking like an old man having Blu-rays, but even the documentaries at Disney Plus, the visual effects documentaries that they seem to have, like the one on Guardian of the Galaxy and the one that they just did with the Marvels. I wish that they would go to the crew and film the crews at VFX on there and put a little bit of that, at least to see a little bit of that. And I think that's why I think this video will be very well received by the industry. It just came out today, but I think it will be extremely well received by the artists and by the VFX companies for sure.
Well, Hugo, I'm so glad we added this patch, and thanks everyone for letting us do this. Hugo will obviously edit in bits of this breakdown into our discussion, but definitely go and find this on YouTube. It's an amazing fun watch for 6 minutes, and we are actually literally so glad it was just released.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll go back to the show now, and I'll see you all later.
I'm actually going to take it one step further, Hugo, and say an interesting part of this film, and it was also the same with Ex Machina and some other films that got to the final five, is that there's not necessarily anything incredibly groundbreaking about this work. From a Hollywood visual effects point of view.
No.
Now, from a Japanese visual effects point of view, it's incredible to see what they've been able to do with character animation and destruction. And someone's going to tell me, well, they've been doing that for a long time, and they have. And but what I mean by that really is they don't necessarily want to bring out a breakdown or produce some sort of content which says, oh, this is the most advanced destruction sims and character animation ever, because it's not. It's just really well done for the style of the movie. And I just wonder whether, Hugo, that's almost why they might be holding back a little bit on blowing their, trumpet on the actual work. Because by the way, I think the work is incredible. Sometimes with visual effects Oscar nominated films, they trumpet some new technological innovation.
It's funny, right? Like, so if this was any other film, if it wasn't done like this, with these angles and the way that this is filmed, it's really well shot, by the way. Like, the cinematography is outstanding of the film. And props to the cinematographer, which I'm sure I'm going to butcher his name. I hope not. But he's called Kozo Shibazaki. I think that's how I pronounce his name. He's an amazing cinematographer, and the film is really well shot. But I think any other film, there's a few things on this film, you can kind of see sometimes a little bit more quirky animation, and that's in purpose, of course, as an homage to the old suit. But there's also, the simulations of water. They're a little bit noisy, and there's a little bit of a jank here. It's not completely, and I think it's in purpose, it's to make this kind of Godzilla movie. But this movie is not about the outstanding visual effects, like if you think about Avatar, like from last year. This movie is about creating outstanding shots, and I think that's what they've achieved. These shots are monumental, that nuclear explosion, the way the Godzilla is stepping in the city, the way his tail is breaking the buildings, the explosion of all the buildings being blown out by the explosion of his breath. The whole thing, the scale is so huge that my mouth was open when I was watching those shots. Yeah. It is like some of the best shots in terms of shot design, angle, composition, lighting. They're just beautiful. They're just so beautiful, and I'm like shocked on how good they look. It's just so cool,
I think that's also the audience reaction. They're shocked at how good it is.
Yeah,
and they're like, because they watch the film and then they might hear something about this low budget, and then they're shocked again. So that's actually an audience factor.
Well, it's shot design. It's the thing. Like, people keep forgetting
it is shot design.
Budget. We are used to, like, these Marvel movies, 300 million, and they don't look as good as this. And I think it has to do with shot design. It's the shot design, the look of it. If you do a good shot, like, I always remember The Matrix, of how they swoop under the radar and got the Oscar over Star Wars Episode 1 with a much more smaller budget and much more simpler VFX, but the shot design was amazing. That was the key here, and I think that's what Godzilla is really going for. I'm sorry I interrupted. I didn't mean to.
Yeah. No. Only that I agree that every single shot is very impactful.
Yeah.
And, that goes all the way from, like, your first view of Godzilla on the beach, or the whole destruction of a city, or when, his atomic breath is being built up via the plates on his back. I mean, I'm like watching that on a television screen going, oh my God, what's about to happen?
Yeah.
There's been a couple of nice articles about the film, not super in-depth technical ones, but the Academy itself has a newsletter called A-Frame where they talk to the director. And one thing he mentioned there was with Godzilla in particular, they didn't do any muscle simulation.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting thing, not just because I think it's a deliberate ode, of course, to the 50s Godzilla and making him look a bit more like a man in suit or a miniature or a puppet. But I am probably one of those people who thinks that we sometimes go a bit too far with jiggle and muscle sims and technical animation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you watch a lion walk or an elephant walk, those things do exist. There is jiggle, and we have the most amazing tools to enable that to happen. But sometimes it's a bit distracting.
It is.
There was something about this Godzilla in Godzilla Minus One where you didn't care about that stuff.
No.
And it still looked great.
It's because of how hard his skin is. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's like stone. And you know the plot line that he's getting more and more damage, and he's getting more and more burn and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it really helps the plot line. So you don't need those muscle systems. You don't need all that fancy pipeline to make that. And I think it also has to do with shot design in terms of camera angles. The way they shoot this film, very grounded. I know we keep talking about grounded VFX in Tenet and on First Man and all those films, but this is super grounded. It's like the camera never does anything stupid. It never does anything outrageous. The camera is either on the floor, watching to these amazing POV shots of the people in the floor being squashed, or the cameras are on top of buildings, just like the news gathering people would be, or sometimes it's on the plane, of course, flying around.
Yeah.
The camera is just so normal and so just watching this spectacle in front of it.
Not overly dynamic, which
No.
is, the trademark, unfortunately, of some of these big,
Yeah.
huge blockbusters.
Which I think helps. It helps to showcase the muscle. Like, you don't notice the muscle so much, and you don't, because you're looking at this wonderful composition. You're looking at the whole shot as a whole. You're not distracted by those details, and your mind, your brain is just not there. You're not thinking about those things.
Yeah. Shot design and composition and, the what's in the frame, which there's a very famous French term, which I'm not going to try and pronounce for that, is so well done. I remember one particular moment where so much is just suggested about the power of Godzilla here. And of course that comes from sound design and music. But there's one particular shot where the city dwellers are running away, and then you see trams and buses and whatnot being thrown from, right of frame through the frame at the back. And Godzilla's not even in the frame.
Yeah.
And I just, I guess we have seen that in big films before to show, the monster doing something crazy. But here, it's just very powerful, and you're kind of just waiting. You're just waiting for her big foot to step down, right? And do this crazy city stomping. Like you want it to happen. It's a really interesting, as I say, visceral reaction to this film. You're feeling sorry for the inhabitants, but you want Godzilla to mess up Ginza, right? I'm not joking, Hugo.
I know what you mean. You just want them to be all trampled up. Yeah, and there's a lot of destruction on this movie. Jesus. They destroy the entire buildings, and they, of course, had to make the entire city from 1945 and actually rebuild all these cities. It's just insane. Funnily enough, you're talking about the sound. There's a really nice anecdote, anecdote on these articles that I've read about the sound design, that they actually, to do the raw, it was such a funny story. They went to a stadium on the speakers of the stadium and actually recorded the raw of Godzilla through the stadium speakers, and then re-recorded that from the speakers themselves to have even more resonance and even more distortion to make it even even more scary, to a point that people living next to the stadium, to the baseball stadium, were even scared because they were hearing this sound outside the door, and they were kind of thinking, oh, is this like something going on outside? So that was also the sound design of the film is just outstanding. And the music, man, the music is very good. Like the soundtrack here is made by Naoki Sato. I think that's how I pronounce his name. Excellent music, excellent soundtrack. I just felt the soundtrack is very memorable, and I can kind of sing it in my head. And that's the trait of a good soundtrack, when you still remember when it shows up. And especially the really body of sound that sometimes you just had a very abstract soundscape while this was all happening. It was great, the music as well.
Do you know what else I really loved about the visual effects in this film, Hugo? Was, and this may well be in other monster films and Godzilla films, we got to see Godzilla in so many different ways. So what I mean by that is stomping around the city, or sometimes you have a more building level shot of him. Sometimes, often, you have from street level. But then you have him swimming. Then you have his head in the ocean, which has become such an iconic image out of this film, actually. You know, a lot of pictures have used that image of him chasing the boat. And then you have, of course, underwater when he's being attacked, but also swimming. I just mean that, you know, you didn't get bored of this creature in any way. And there were so many different things Godzilla was doing. That, to me, just made it more interesting. And from a visual effects point of view, you got to see him at different places in different scales as well. And I bet the scale is often wrong. Like, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But who cares? Like,
it doesn't really matter as well, because he just keeps growing. So it doesn't. It actually, it's quite fun how they can really play around with that, and it's also daytime as well. It's funny to see him with so much light. You know, like, it's especially on the ocean. It's like sunny days that you see these shots, and you're right. It's so iconic, that shot of almost the shark under the water with when they're after the towboats, the mine towboats. It's really outstanding work. I know. And there's this like really funny story as well about the water simulations, isn't it? That they actually like were not really planning to have so much water simulation on the film, but then like one of the compositors was working on the film, and he actually did some simulations, and then they ended up like really enjoying them, and then they kind of like went through that route and then added that to the film, and there's like really nice stories about that as well.
Yeah. And I would say something else that comes from my one experience being in Tokyo for SIGGRAPH Asia a few years ago. By the way, it's at SIGGRAPH Asia this year again.
Yeah.
So can't wait to be in Tokyo for that. There is an incredible CG community in Japan.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, in games, in animation, and in filmmaking. But as I understand it from people over there who told me, it's often under the radar.
Yeah.
And yes, you know, I really don't know the details, but we do hear about the wages being kind of low in this industry. But there is an obsession, is what I really want to get to, about CG. And there were just so many young artists at SIGGRAPH Asia in Tokyo wanting to learn from American artists. And like really, really, really obsessive about how do you use Maya to do this. And then in particular, how do you use Houdini to do things, lighting and effect sims and procedural stuff. I think this film is a bit of a calling card for how much Houdini has been implemented at some of these studios, this studio in particular. Because for so many years, Japan was still where everyone worked in Softimage.
Yeah.
Softimage had this place there, that sort of remained even when Softimage went end of life.
Yeah.
But Houdini in this film, it just seems to shine. And I guess I wanted to make that a special point because you can just feel it in we're going to tackle these water sims. We're going to tackle this lighting. We're going to tackle these destruction sims. And we've got the tools to do it, so why not?
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. And it's I'm sure it's going to, now with the nomination, I'm sure they're so thrilled, and if they win, they might even win. That's just going to push even more people into this industry. It's going to push even more young people to want to jump in. And I can't wait to see even more heavy VFX work coming from Japan, because we don't get much of that, I guess. I wish that we got more of that. I sometimes get something, and sometimes I buy it on either a special edition somewhere, or I import it, but it is still a difficult market to get in, because a lot of times I buy a lot of things from Amazon Japan because of my games obsessions, because of my video games obsession. But when you buy a video game in Japan, it still has the English title, so I you can always switch it to subtitles. At least you can still hear it in Japanese, but it has subtitles. Buying films in Japanese on Amazon Japan is a bit more tricky, because they don't often have subtitles in English on their Blu-rays, and so that is already kind of an impossibility. I can never even understand what's going on. And so that is a shame. And it is a shame that they don't have more subtitles, because I think there is a lot of really cool visual effects coming from Japan, and I wish I could see more of it. But unfortunately, I don't know Japanese, so I'm not gonna be able to do that. But this is a common problem. Like, we also get the same in Germany. Germany. I buy a lot of Blu-rays, so that's why I know these things. But Germany also doesn't really have a lot of subtitles. Portugal also doesn't have that. It is a shame that some countries don't open up their catalogs by putting more languages on their films and on their Blu-rays and on their digital versions, which costs almost nothing to do that in these days. And then people would see more of that work. But I couldn't agree more. This is such a level of inspiration to the young community there. I don't even imagine, like, SIGGRAPH Asia this year is going to explode with Godzilla. If they win, man, it's going to be like crazy.
Well, if they win, but, the other thing is, I'm also probably a bit naive about how much work does go on there in those industries we've already mentioned. But I have been noticing some incredible, say, Netflix Japanese shows, and have really enjoyed those, and started interviewing people who've worked on them. And they say, we're just trying to make it as good as Hollywood can do. And, well, of course they're going to employ, maybe some Japanese artists have been working in Canada, North America, and Europe, and then have gone back and, can implement some of the high fidelity type work that gets done in those big Hollywood shows.
Yeah.
There's definitely some incredible TV shows coming out of Japan. But with Godzilla, if they win, I mean, it's almost a win for great work, but also hearkening back to classic Godzilla, right, Hugo? Because that's the only other point I wanted to make is there's some beautiful CG animation, amazing effects sims, and all that sort of stuff. But there's also, you kind of already mentioned it, but there's sort of these shots that look old school.
Yeah.
The suit of Godzilla is one. There's a couple of tank firing shots that look kind of like miniatures, but are clearly 1950s type inspired imagery. I mean, this just has to be what it is.
Yeah.
Or they ran out of time. I don't know. That kind of thing. And then sometimes when Godzilla is like flattening these houses or shacks or, shanty areas, I was like, is that like maybe some sort of real set or a miniature that they're flattening? But I'm sure it's digital environment.
There is. I don't know if I read on one of the articles that there was some miniature houses used.
Oh, right.
And scanned for the film. I'm not sure how much of the miniature house stayed in the film, but they definitely did a few miniature houses, and they did a lot of really advanced scanning, and then brought it into Houdini to do the destruction on some of it. So I'm not sure. Until more breakdowns come out, I'm not entirely sure how much of it stayed on the shots, but there's definitely miniature work. Maybe you should dig more into that and see if you can find which companies did that. And actually, by the way, we should shout out the company. The company is called the Visual Effects Company, is called Shirogumi, isn't it? Is that how I pronounce it?
I think so. Yeah, we mentioned it before, but they're awesome, and make sure you go to their website and see the kind of work they've been doing.
But I'm glad you mentioned that. There's also like some really cool shots that you see the practical side of it on these documentaries that have been released, the Japanese documentaries, where you see the green sets. A lot of these shots are really, really just full CG. Like there's just like a little bit of a floor where there are some actors running around, and there's like a little piece of green screen. A lot of these physical sets that were shot outside when the people are running and being stomped by Godzilla, there's an enormous, like, I don't know, man, it's like 90% of the shot is full CG, and then there's like an enormous amount of mocap that was used to make the extra people running around and falling down. And they talk about having almost 200 stunt people being mocapped on the mocap studio. And then, of course, a lot of drone shots as well of people being running. And so there's all those breakdowns are great. And you can really see a lot of work went into really making these very beautiful and very historical, accurate city representations with all the buildings of the time, of the period, of all the cars and all the of 1945 period. And that alone is like a massive part of the work. I know we keep only talking about Godzilla, but there's a lot of that as well. I don't know how many shots. There's 600 and something shots. That's right. There's like a number of that. There's like 600 shots on this film. It's quite a lot.
Where the practical sets and any miniatures that might have been photogrammetried for CG destruction and where the digital extensions connect is very seamless in this film.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm convinced that some of these wide shots, of course, of the destroyed city areas are just completely CG. But in some of the, like you mentioned, the people running away, like the seams are brilliant. And, you know, it probably feels like one of those films that really benefited Hugo from having multiple techniques.
Yeah.
Right? As you say, let's get a real shot. Let's do the green screen. Let's do mocap. Let's add, CG destruction. And then you never really quite know how it's done. Instead of just a one-trick pony, this film seems to use it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that's why I think that's why also it was nominated. I think it was nominated because it has this really great collage of a lot of different techniques, a lot of different types of shots, and full CG shots, destruction shots, green screen shots, and then of course it has the creature and the Godzilla. But it also has like this scale on everything. Even those shots are huge as well. I of course there's more things. The towboats are CG as well. There's this enormous boat wreck as well, which is CG as well. On the water, the warship, and of course the warships themselves when they're fighting Godzilla on the end, and the underwater lasers, everything. I just feel like you get a lot of money for your worth, I guess, on this film, because there's so much going on. Although there's only 600 shots, it's not like the 2,000 mark that you usually get on Marvel movies, but they are really outstanding. I can't praise it enough. I think.
Do you have a favorite shot? I'll tell you mine first, and people might totally disagree with me. It's the shot of Godzilla's mouth regenerating after they've tried to put the mine in it for the first. I love the approach they took there, which was almost like replacement animation or something like that, And it looks a bit kooky, but for some reason it just fits the aesthetic of this film so well. And I almost cheered at the TV screen when I watched that bit.
It's so cool. Well, it really fits because it almost looks like stop animation, doesn't it? It looks like animation made by hand. It looks like stop motion, because the way it builds. But it's so well made and so cool, and it's such a good plot device because you get it then. Oh, that's why he keeps coming back, and that's why he never really. And I guess an appendix to that shot is the other shot where you see him being displaced and burned by the nuclear explosion. You just see his eye, and it's like burning all around him. That's a beautiful shot as well. Oh man, yeah, that's a lovely shot. That's a really good shot. I'll tell you which one is my favorite. My favorite one is the when he's on the city, sending he basically sends his blast, and then you see the entire city being leveled by this blast. Then you have an enormous nuclear explosion going around. So that the entire section is amazing. It's like one of the most powerful blasts I've ever seen, especially how the buildings get liquefied almost. But my favorite shot is when you have the nuclear aftermath. You see the mushroom of the cloud of the explosion, and Godzilla is just on it on the right side, roaring, and you see the smoke, and you're in a low angle, and you see like him on the right side, and you see this big mushroom of an explosion, and he's just like just roaring. That shot is amazing. It's like, wow, give them the Oscar already. That is such a beautiful shot, and
I mean,
that's
Hugo, give you the Oscar for acting. Give you the Oscar. Do your roaring.
I put a battery just for you.
Oh dear.
I think that's
I'm resisting getting out.
I know you have
Godzilla over here, but we've done it before, I think. So I'll leave her there.
That is my favorite shot, but I wanted to like just do a little anecdote about this. Like, all this conversation about Oppenheimer that we can't do the nuclear explosion because it's going to look silly in CG. Oh my God, we have to do it practical because it's going to look bad in CG. Look at this. We had 2 nuclear explosions on the Oscar contenders. We have a nuclear explosion in Godzilla that looks absolutely mind-blowing. And then you have a nuclear explosion on The Creator that looks absolutely mind-blowing. What were they thinking? My God, it would have looked so much better if they would have done a CG explosion on Oppenheimer, and they would have been nominated. God damn it. What a lost opportunity.
They would have been nominated if they'd done a CG explosion.
I'm joking.
I think you're referring to the way Chris Nolan has very consistently said, and I don't know where he got the language from originally, that he didn't feel like it would be dangerous looking enough.
What?
Or threatening enough.
Look at
CG.
Godzilla,
and I
it's
think,
so dangerous.
I think he, got the industry into knots about that. But I have come around to the view with Oppenheimer that if you watch the original footage of the Trinity test, it is a bit low key.
It still looks bigger than the normal one. It still looks bigger than
Many of the edits of it include other nuclear tests, so you've got that in your brain.
Yeah.
That is what they were thinking. There was like, oh, we saw this Trinity test at super high frame rate, shot in super high frame rate, and it looks like this. Everyone else has a view about what a nuclear explosion looks like.
I know. I know.
I'm not defending
necessarily
the comments about no CG. I'm defending a look design process.
I know. Although I don't know the veracity. Of course, you never know the source of everything. But I've seen reputable websites showing the full original explosion next to the one that is on the film. And yes, there are some sections that look the same. But the original explosion is still bigger, more menacing, and more beautiful than the one they've made. And the one they've made still looks like a gasoline pop. That's the thing. It's still, and I'm just making the opinion that it is possible to make a scary explosion. We've seen it. The entire Godzilla movie is a scary event. Like the whole thing. When he melts the buildings, man, that is like. I've never seen anything like that. Like it's. I don't think I've ever seen such a powerful image of like basically leveling a place. Like we've seen destruction, on films, but this is another level because he liquefies the city. It's just insane.
Yeah.
With that,
which leads to one bad plot point where. That gets pushed into the alleyway and ultimately survives. Okay. Well, let's not talk about that. I just want to make a quick shout out to a few websites here that have covered the film in a really fun way. One is the team at Maxon who make ZBrush now. got a special interview with, I think, some modelers and sculptors on the film and were able to show some work. Another is the Japanese CG World magazine has an incredible piece of coverage, mostly in terms of just really great imagery, breakdown imagery. And, I think that's really worth looking at. We'll have links to those.
And I'm going to put it on the screen. There is one thing that I loved about our article. You sent it to me last night, and I'm definitely going to put the stills on the video.
Yep.
We see software. I'm like, oh my God, we actually see desktop software. We actually see frames and screen grabs of the softwares of Houdini
and node graphs in Houdini. Yeah.
I know. That is such a retro thing to see. Reminds me of like the Maya book from Twister, like where you actually see like a big Zagapur friend of the show. Like he's like doing a tutorial on the magazine. On the book. I loved seeing that because that is so rare, Ian. It's so rare to see this these days.
But that actually is the thing that made me think about the SIGGRAPH Asia experience and how proud I think these artists are of having become Houdini experts effectively, And I know that Side Effects has a nice presence in Japan, so that's part of that too. But yeah, those are the two main pieces I'd give a shout out for. And then you'll be showing this Toho video featurette breakdown, which has it. Basically, it was a behind-the-scenes video released a long time ago.
Yeah.
And has a lot of visual effects stuff in it, plus on-the-set B-roll.
Yep.
And if you watch the full video, it has some very interesting discussion points from the director.
It does. It has some really nice interviews with the actors as well and how they shot it. And you just need to I know most people, you need to do a few steps to get it to work. You need to turn on the automatic subtitling from YouTube, because the normal one will just be in Japanese. You need to go into the options and actually choose auto-generated subtitles. And I don't know how accurate they are, but I followed it and sounded fine. It made it made sense.
So, it's definitely the way to watch it if you don't speak Japanese. Well, it's been really fun talking about the film, Hugo, and in some ways there's not as much deep dive info on the visual effects, which is actually the reason why I think it will win the Oscar, because it's just a really great use of visual effects.
Oh man.
No, I really mean that.
I know what you mean. I think it has a big shot of winning.
But just to wrap things up here, Hugo and I have a very special kind of section of the VFX Notes podcast. How about I just jump to it now, Hugo? Are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. And it's VFX Notes in black and white. Wow. Even more vibrant. Even more stunning. Takes us right back to the 1950s, 1940s.
Yes.
Doesn't it, Hugo?
VFX Notes Noir. We're gonna start having a jazz. I'll put a bit of jazz music on the background, so it make it a bit more noir. Yes.
Can I just say, if anyone has seen Godzilla Minus One in black and white, I would love you to write to us or put in a comment on the YouTube site and tell us what that was like and comparing the two, because I'm dying to see both versions of the film on a proper cinema screen.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how that black and white version plays.
I hope they release a Blu-ray like they did with Mad Max and they did with Logan. Both those films got released, and Parasite as well. Parasite also had a black and white version, so a lot of these Blu-rays have 2 discs, and you can watch either the black and white or the color version. I hope they do that as well. This was great, man. I really enjoyed talking with you about the film, and I really want to remind everyone that we, like every year, now this is the 3rd year running on the VFX Notes Podcast, we do have a playlist with all the nominees all together. So we've done that 2 years ago and last year. And so there's a playlist with all 5 of the episodes that relate to the 5 nominees. And so you can watch all of the 5 ones together and put your bets in which one is going to win,
Yes. All right. Well, hopefully you've had enough of us in black and white. We'll be back in color next time. Hugo, lots of fun chatting about Godzilla Minus One. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man. Great to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.